Hey there, and welcome to Google's Innovation for the Nation 2013. I'm Christopher Dorabek, the anchor and managing editor of GovLoop's Dorabek Insider. It's an online program and blog that focuses on 6 words, helping government do its job better. And thank you for joining us for the Innovation of the Nation Virtual Summit, where we're also focusing on helping you do your job better. And we're doing that by introducing you to the government transformers, the people who are out there doing it, making the innovation happen. And in this session, we're going to talk about the future of technology in the government. It is less of a debate today about cloud or no cloud, but the real question today is how you best use the cloud and how you integrate multiple clouds. And we're going to do that. We're going to talk about that with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I got all the words out right. They were one of the early organizations to move to the cloud. We're going to find out how they did that, why they did that, and how it's changed how they're doing business. During our presentation and throughout the day, if you have questions, we would love to hear from you. You can submit your questions here in the virtual conference center, or you can tweet us. Use our hashtag, you know how hashtags work, hashtag IFTN2013, Innovation of the Nation 2013. It's nice and easy, IFTN 2013. Or you can tweet me directly at @CDorabek. We will answer as many questions as we can. And by the way, after we finish up here, there will be an opportunity to chat with our speakers. We'll tell you more about that later on. Earlier, we talked a little bit about the framework that we're living in today, this disruptive world, and that the impact it's having on government. Ahead, we're going to talk about mobile and security. No issues there, right? And we're also going to talk about needles and haystacks. We're going to talk about speeding access to that mission-critical knowledge, which we all know we have, but sometimes it's hard to find and get access to, so we'll talk about that later on. And of course, if you miss any of these discussions, they are all going to be made available online, on demand, if you will, on the Google Federal YouTube page, and we'll also send you a link after. If you registered, you'll get a link and you'll be able to find them all. But let's talk to some of the folks who are out there and doing this. One of them is Daniel McCrae. He is director of NOAA's Service Delivery Division, and also joining me is Mike Bradshaw. He is director of Google Federal. Mike, why don't you take it away?
Great, thanks, Chris, and it's good seeing you online. Dan, thanks again for joining us today. We appreciate it. First question for you. Why did NOAA decide to go to cloud computing in the first place?
Well, Mike, several years ago, NOAA found itself in the position with 19 distinct separate email systems. And you know, in retrospect, many decisions could look like the right decision, but at that time it was pretty obvious that there was a need for an enterprise-wide integrated email system, and email is one of those things that are fairly easy to do in the cloud. It's been out there for a long time from the consumer side, and it was a fairly easy decision for NOAA to do that. So about 2 years ago, December 2011, is when the migration was complete, and NOAA moved 25,000 users into the Google Apps for Government environment using email initially, and then we also began to discover that the other applications that were available that permitted collaboration began to garner a lot of interest amongst the NOAA users themselves, and it's kind of taken off from there.
That sounds great. What advice would you give to agencies who are considering a similar move to cloud computing?
Well, I mean, the advice I'd give really isn't any different than what agencies should be doing, whether they're going to build their own or move into the cloud, and that is make sure you've got a really good handle on what the functional requirements are. You know, there's a number of mandates out, the Cloud First federal mandate. That doesn't mean take everything to the cloud without doing your homework first. So you need to have a good understanding of your functional requirements, what your architecture is, and will the cloud services be able to integrate with your architecture. You need to have a good understanding of how it's going to integrate with your security model, and you also need to know what contract or acquisition strategy you're going to take in order to make this happen, which Umesh, the previous speaker, alluded to in terms of how the government's going to need to sort of take a different approach to acquiring these services. The number one thing I would say is make sure you've got good governance in place, policies and procedures for how you think you want to use these cloud services before you go out and try to buy them.
Mike, can I just butt in and ask, is it a different skill set than you have had? Have you had to tweak your skill sets in order to manage this effectively?
So that's a good question, Chris. The skill sets are morphing, I think, across the federal government. When you look at what's necessary to manage or even in some sense broker cloud services within a federal organization, as opposed to the skill sets that are required to manage the infrastructure itself. And so you need people that have good project and program management skills, that have an understanding of different approaches to acquisition, being able to really drill down and distill the functional requirements into something meaningful that can then be translated into a solicitation package that you're going to put out for competition. So yes, the skill sets are different, and they are evolving.
Yeah, and Dan, following up on that one as well, how has the acceptance been of the new technology? I think sometimes change management can be some of the most difficult part of moving to the cloud.
So that's an excellent point. I mean, everyone has their personal preferences, or they get used to working within a specific environment. And when you look at software as a service in particular, where you're going to be putting something in front of an end user, managing expectations is key. And NOAA, during the email migration, spent a great amount of time in making sure that there was a good communication strategy developed, that we involved the end user community early on in helping to get an understanding of what was going to be necessary, and then making sure they had training resources available as well. So managing expectations and developing a good communications plan is critical as you start moving away from stuff you own to stuff that you're going to acquire from a different source.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think you guys really led the way as far as showing best practices for that migration. And you certainly had an interesting group of people there, the scientists. I mean, NOAA is a somewhat different community of government employees, very interesting ones. It's also a highly mobile workplace. So what are you doing to address the needs of the mobile employee at NOAA?
So it is a highly mobile workplace. We've got employees in every weather forecast office in every state throughout the United States, and we've got folks that are doing research on glaciers. We have folks on the ground that are doing damage assessments after severe weather. We've got them on NOAA ships, taking measurements. So they are literally all over the place, and we want to be able that they can use a variety of platforms to do the job, and whether that's a notebook computer, a Chromebook, a thick client, or some other smartphone type of device, we want to make sure that they have the tools necessary. So in addition to what you would think is traditional email services acquired through the Google Apps, we also have the Drive and the productivity applications that are part of that. And so with those services being in the cloud, it's very easy for folks to collaborate independent of their geographical location and really time, because all of those services are not tied to a specific physical place. So for the folks that are spread across multiple states or areas, they have the ability to collaborate in real time. I personally encountered an opportunity to put this to the test. I'm on an assignment to the department, and it involves probably a dozen folks from different bureaus, Census, NOAA, NIST, and some of the other bureaus as well. And we all came together in a very short time frame to work on this project. And what we were able to do was use the Google Apps ecosystem to rapidly set up a site, a Google site, literally within hours of us getting notification about this project. And many of my colleagues from the other bureaus have not, are not in this environment. So with very little training, we were able to set up this site, show them how to, essentially navigate, and we now have a document repository. We've got a shared calendar. We have lists. We've got real-time collaboration on documents and reports that we were producing. And I myself took a Chromebook and nothing else with me, and have been living down in office space in the department for the last 3 weeks, and have been able to basically take care of everything I needed to with that Chromebook, which the lesson that I take away from that is it opens up lots of opportunities for NOAA going forward to think about how we want to address things like telework, a highly mobile workforce, and a virtual desktop infrastructure, for example. That takes on a completely different dynamic and characteristic given the experience that I'm living in right now.
But Dan, Mike asked about how you're dealing with change management and being able to do exactly what you're talking about. That has to help a lot in terms of employees going, hey, this isn't such a bad thing.
Right. So the idea is, I think that again, employees tend to have a preference and for what they use. So the focus is make sure you're meeting the mission requirements, exposing them in a very non-threatening way about the capabilities that are out there. And what we've seen is a lot of sort of grassroots enthusiasm about the services and the capabilities that are built in to the Google Apps ecosystem, to include sites. Once we activated sites, there was a big rush for folks to begin putting those or making use of those services. So I think employees have a really good ideas about how to get their job done, and you want to make sure you're listening to those good ideas, and then going out and acquiring the services that will enable them to get their jobs done in the most effective way. And by effective, I mean mission alignment, reduced risk footprint, and good taxpayer ROI. If you can do those things, I think you've got a recipe for success there.
Dan, going back to your Chromebook discussion here, you and I talked about that before, and you said this is actually sort of a special assignment that you have here to see if you can completely live in this environment, try out the browser-only, environment. Again, I think it's another place where NOAA is leading the way. Is there any other detail you can give us about that, or any place? Tell us where you'd like to take this going forward, and what do you think you're going to find as a result of this assignment?
Well, sort of as a follow-on to this assignment, what I would like to do is take a look at, figuring out, is there a subset of the workforce in NOAA that can live essentially within that environment and only that environment, and not need access to a thick client with locally installed applications, for example. And if there is a large enough population within NOAA that can simply exist in that environment, that opens up all sorts of opportunities for us. The need for a traditional VDI really goes away at that point, because if you look at the three big buckets of virtualization, the user state, the application and then the server virtualization pieces, you've effectively virtualized the user state if they can live with Chrome and the Google Apps. They have access to that anywhere from any device in a very, in a secure manner. Which then it gives you the ability to sort of refocus the resources rather than trying to do a VDI across the board and building out an infrastructure that may be required to support that. You can do it in a much more cost-effective way if a large section of your workforce can use the Chromebook model. You free up resources to then build out sort of a best-of-class traditional VDI for that portion of the workforce that really needs access to maybe some specialized applications or secure remote access to server-side applications within the NOAA infrastructure. So it's sort of a false force multiplier from that effect, because as was pointed out in the previous session as well, budgets are not getting bigger, and we have to get smarter about how we prioritize the resources that we do have available. And so I look at that from a number of angles, and I think using the Chromebook example is a good opportunity for us there.
That's Mike, great. I just want to butt in because we had a great question from Twitter, and Dan, I know this isn't your expertise, but at Book Hut was saying, of course, a lot of mapping goes into atmospheric research, and there must be tools and apps that you can use to actually help you do that job better.
Sure, Chris. I mean, NOAA produces lots of data, and pretty much all the data that NOAA produces is geospatially referenced in some way, whether it's a sea surface temperature in the Atlantic or data informing a weather forecast. So the Google Maps engine is in use in NOAA. It is not in my portfolio specifically, but I think there's lots of opportunity there to begin to develop applications that ride on those different platforms. And for example, getting storm damage assessment teams on the ground with a smartphone in their hand running that type of app that's updating a database on the back end, or folks taking surveys of fish populations in the field. Those are all functions that are being performed now, and I think with the different platforms that are out there, the Maps engine and the Apps engine specifically, we've got a great opportunity here to evolve those processes. I think, personally, this is an exciting time to be at NOAA because I think we're just on the cusp of moving away from the traditional software as a service, the email and the office productivity apps, and really moving into some of these other areas which are very exciting.
Yeah, and Dan, that was the point I was going to make about NOAA. Again, email in the cloud, more utilitarian it seems like right now. NOAA is on the leading edge of looking at some of these different technologies, such as geospatial technologies, and leading the way there as well. And it's very exciting to watch you guys. Any other transformation projects you have going? Sounded like a lot already.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're transformative as much as just trying to do the right things. I think we have a mobile device management platform that we have as software as a service, and what that's going to do, I think, is position us very well for looking at a bring your own device, or I'm inclined to say use any device. Very shortly here, we have it in a testing mode right now. That particular platform, again, because we acquired it as a software as a service, very easy to deploy, set up, establish, and I'm excited about what that holds as the future. For the future, our entire Tier 1 service desk for our corporate services was acquired as software as a service as well. And I think we're going to continue to evolve that. And then again, just looking at different applications and services that will help us better serve the NOAA workforce and the public at large. Again, I think we're just on the cusp of it, and so this is an exciting time to be in NOAA.
I mean, does it just blow anybody else away that we're talking about bring your own device in a government frame? I mean, if you had asked me this 3 years ago, I would have put a lot of money down that this wouldn't even be on the table for government. And yet people are seriously looking at it.
Well, I think you have to, Chris. It's going to come down to the business case, right? And that goes back to what are the mission requirements, what do the security requirements dictate, and is it cost effective?
Yeah.
If you find yourself with a set of highly specialized requirements to meet your mission needs, that probably shouldn't go in the cloud, right? I mean, so you really have to look at what the business case is. But I think you have to do the business case. You can't ignore it. And whether it comes down to making it more beneficial for the end user because they have a device now that they're used to using on a daily basis, whether that frees up other resources to invest in other services within the organization, or whether it's just a way to position your organization as a good place to work because you have those types of programs. You have to look at all of those options. And you're right. I mean, a couple of years ago, there was lots of resistance, and I think that resistance is futile at this point. You got to do the business case on these things.
Let me ask a question from Alan Marcus, who used our online platform to send us a question, and he says, "How do you deal with sensitive data? Email is it's the way we do business now, and how do you deal with that sensitive stuff?"
So, just because you put it in the cloud doesn't mean you get to forget about it, right? So there's still the due diligence aspect, and the organization is responsible for that. So when you're looking at software as a service or other cloud services that you want to acquire, you need to make sure it fits within your security requirements. And so for NOAA, we have to comply with the FISMA requirements and the NIST regulations and Department of Homeland Security requirements. And you have to make sure that your service provider can adhere to those requirements. The FedRAMP initiative is an effort for the government at the federal level to help define what some of those should look like, but still each organization is going to have its own requirements. And the other thing I would mention is, as organizations begin to adopt these services, and they might want system integrators in the mix there to help facilitate moving into those services, you have to make sure that those system integrators as well, if they're providing some process or procedure or infrastructure, are also signing up to your security requirements and can meet those needs of the organization.
Mike, is the security issue, how much is that, as you're out talking to folks, is that still the driving factor here? Is that the first thing people ask you about?
Chris, I think it's actually evolved a lot. It was originally the only question they asked us about up front. I think a lot of people understood cloud computing, but security was the biggest question we got. Then people began to realize that probably security in the cloud was better for them than what they had in an on-premise solution, just because of the number of people who could focus on the security aspect. We're seeing it pop up again every once in a while, but it certainly is not the center of attention that it was, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago when cloud computing came on. As Dan said, you determine what you should be putting in the cloud, what data should go in there, and make those decisions.
You always have to think about it. Dan, we only have a couple minutes left, but talk about how you measure return on investment in everything that you've done, which sounds like so much. What do you do in your free time? But how do you measure return on investment in all this?
So there's a couple of ways you can do that, Chris. I mean, again, I have a tendency to focus, or maybe some people would say fixate on the functional requirements and the business case, right? And so some some of these decisions will be very obvious from a pure cost basis. Um, NOAA, I'm not going to go into specific figures, but you can probably surmise that moving from 19 independent, discretely managed email systems into a single email platform uh, probably saved us some money in the long run. And so you can look at it from a traditional sort of cost-benefit analysis as well. Before you go out and buy these things, you should really be benchmarking what your cost of operations are so that you can, 12 months, 24 months into it, look and see what the returns are. Um, you know, there's nothing out there that says once you make the decision, you can't make another decision after that if it looks like it was the wrong one to do. So you got to keep an eye on your traditional sort of cost model. Another way you can measure it is if you have people right now that are involved in managing your infrastructure that you own. My to-do list is much longer than the resources I have available to me to get those things accomplished. So there's an opportunity cost in there as well. So if I can move services into the cloud that will then free up those resources to focus on more mission-aligned activities, I recoup that opportunity cost. So that's another way to look at sort of the return on investment holistically, above and beyond what your typical cost model would be. Along that lines, however, I would say that one of the challenges is that you do have to be careful about the personnel aspect and moving stuff into the cloud. Many of the cost savings are strictly based on what you're going to recoup based on the personnel or the positions you'll be able to give up or give back. And I think before you do that, you need to see is there an opportunity cost associated with that, and can you refocus those folks to do more mission-aligned activities within the organization.
We only have 3 minutes left, and Mike, I want to ask both of you the same question, but as you mentioned that things have evolved over time. We're talking, the cloud discussion is much different today than it was even a year ago. What folks who are tuned in and are thinking about this, and they're hearing what Noah's doing and saying, hey, I'd like to be there, what should they be thinking about? Where should their mindset be? Mike first, and then I'll go to
Mike first. I think we have to step way back and look at, are we applying some security standards to technology that's available now? Are we applying older technology security standards to them, realistically? We have great technology that's evolving very quickly. It's evolving so that it can deal with threats coming at companies from around the world. There's a lot of great cost-saving benefits to them. And as the federal government, can we step back and maybe be a little bit more, or evolve a little bit more quickly as far as looking at that technology and how it can be used in the government to save a lot of money and to help get information out to customers?
Dan, what do you tell your fellow agencies that are looking to step into the cloud?
Well, there's probably a few points. Mike certainly hit on a couple of the major ones there. One, I would say governance. Make sure you've got your policies and procedures well established. Going to the cloud can do lots of good things for a well-managed IT operation. Taking a poorly managed IT operation into the cloud is a recipe for disaster. Make sure you've got good architecture alignment. Make sure you've got your security requirements established well in advance, and that your partners know what those security requirements are early on in the process. Make sure you
And
got
we're
a
going to
good
have to leave it there. We're out of time.
Okay.
I told you we'd run out of time. Isn't it nice when we do? I want to thank Google's Mike Bradshaw and NOAA's Dan McCrae. But nice job. A reminder that if we didn't get to your question, well, you still have an opportunity. Mike and Dan are going to be hanging out. Well, I keep using that term. We're hanging out here. They're going to be. You can chat with them in our virtual conference center. And if there's something we didn't touch on, you can do that right now. So head over there next. And this and all of our sessions will be available on demand on the Google Federal YouTube page. If you registered, you'll get the link. Coming up, we're going to talk about needles and haystacks and how you can speed access to that mission-critical knowledge. That's ahead. We're also going to talk about working better together, collaboration. I know, what a shock. We've heard a little bit about that already. But coming up next, we're going to talk about mobile and security. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Mike. Great hanging out with you. We'll be back.
Same here.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Mike.
Take care. Bye-bye.